Thursday to you. Welcome to the Entree Architect Community Context and Clarity live session. I'm joined today by Katharine MacPhail, my co-host on these Thursday Context and Clarity lives. Hi, Katharine. How are you?
Hello. I'm
Thank-
excellent. How are you?
I am well now that I've actually hit the go live button.
Mm.
The reason that we come here every weekday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern, and specifically on Thursdays in this live version that we are simulcasting not only to the Entree Architect Community Facebook group, but also to LinkedIn and to YouTube and to Twitch, is so that we can find clarity around the things that matter most to you. Many of you are small firm architects, but because we're outside, we've spread ourselves all over the internet today. We know that some of you may not be architects. You might be other creative services providers. You might be other professional services firms, maybe leaders, maybe employees. Whoever you are, wherever you are, welcome. Thank you for joining us in this conversation today. The way this works is that once a week, we pick a topic. It's a need to know topic for the success of small firm architects, for other professional services folks. And on these Thursdays, these special editions on Thursdays, we invite a special guest to join us so that we can dig even deeper into the topic, into the conversation. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. Also, hello to those of you who are listening to us in the future. It's a really fascinating concept because we are recording this. This does come out in a podcast version. It'll come out actually Monday, Katharine, Monday. A few days from now.
Monday at noon, I think, for those who can't wait all day.
Exactly. Monday at noon in the recorded version. So hello to those of you who are listening to the live version of this as well. Everybody needs to understand, everybody needs to know this is live. We are working without a net here, and we're just going for it. So as you come in, one of the things that we ask, no matter where you are, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, our huge following on Twitch, say hi. Let us know that you're here. Let us know where you're joining the conversation from. It is always fun to see how far around the globe, and I mean that quite literally, because often we spread from Anaheim to Australia. And it's fun to see where everybody is in the world in this conversation. It also helps us make sure that we're actually live on all of these different platforms. But say hi. Let us know that you're here. Even if you're just listening in, even if you're trying to multitask while this conversation is going on, say hi. Let us know that you're here. And I think without further ado, it's about time that we introduce our special guest today. What do you think?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. If you haven't been joining us this week, we've sort of had a theme for the week. And the theme for the week we've been talking about all week it's been about culture, about firm culture, your company culture. And I want to make it clear that everybody, all of you have a culture. It's not just firms with employees. It is also the solo practitioners that are out there. You have a culture as well. This isn't a conversation just for firm leaders or owners or managers. It's also for the employees. It's all about this ecosystem that becomes our culture. And so it fascinates me that while we've been talking about culture all week, and I've learned that a big part of culture resides within our team. I'm sure we'll talk about that more today, but I find it interesting. One of the things that I find interesting about our guest today is that he was cut from the basketball team 2 years in a row, yet he's written a brilliant book about being a teammate. He's built an entire company around being a teammate and being a team. That's fascinating to me. So obviously he's an author, but he's not a basketball star. He's a co-founder and a CEO. His book is called Do Better Work, and his company is Lessonly. Max Yoder, welcome to Context and Clarity Live. Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here. It was really funny to see me kind of pop up there. Thanks for having me today. Katharine, Jeff, this is going to be a blast.
We're looking forward to it, Max. And you know, that's just part of the magic that we have going on here, the whole popping up thing. We're doing everything we can to make this as fun as possible. There's a lot to dig into in your book, Do Better Work. For anybody out there that hasn't read the book yet, you need to pick it up. It's an easy read. I'll say it that way. I think it's really easy to consume. You've done a great job of boiling it down to concepts that we can understand.
Thank you.
It's also, by the way, if you have the Kindle plan, you can get it, I think, free right now on Kindle. So if that's your
I'm not
thing,
sure. That's cool.
I think it is. It's very available, of course, anywhere you buy books as well. But there's a lot to unpack there. I also know that there are some things, maybe slight tangents, that you're passionate about. And one of those things is perfectionism. So if it's okay with you, I want to start by asking, where does perfectionism come from?
Jeff, I wish I knew. I only know where I want it to go. And where I want it to go is to be a less pervasive presence in my life and the lives of people that I love and the lives of people I've never met, because I find it to be a very self-limiting, self-defeating, unproductive game. And I like to compare it to wholeness, where it's kind of the antithesis of perfectionism is wholeness, where I can recognize that I have above average qualities, and below average qualities, just like everybody else. And, I'm a human. And if I try to be a perfectionist, I have to deny my humanity. I have to deny the things that don't come naturally to me, the things that are outside of my, core wheelhouse, the things that I don't do well. And I'd like to accept all those things, because I've found across every kind of spirituality, every religion, everything that kind of helps the human navigate the human experience, acceptance is a central part, if not the central part, of navigating the human experience, accepting what's happening with ourselves, who we are, and accepting what's happening with other people and in the world. And acceptance doesn't mean agreement, but just looking at it clearly. Because if I can't look at something clearly, I have to contort it, distort it, see it not for what it is, but for maybe what I want it to be. And that can get me off track real fast. So I think perfectionism is a plague. And I've heard it described as the world's greatest con game. And I agree with that. It's a con game because you can't win, and you won't be better for playing.
Yeah, that's a great point. So maybe even going down that path a little bit further, what do you think is the real threat? And, like I said at the beginning, we have an audience that I'm going to assume today is filled with a lot of architects. There may be others, right? There we may have other creatives here, other professional services, doctors, attorneys, accountants, et cetera. A lot of expert type people. What do you think the real threat of professionalism is, especially in the context of quote unquote being an expert?
So when you say professionalism, are you kind of saying like professionalism?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
you're good.
Perfectionism.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Perfectionism and being an expert. I would never show up to a situation and call myself an expert. I think that sets the bar real high. Do I have competence in areas? Yes. But the world is too chaotic for me to be an expert across really anything, and people are too chaotic, and events are too chaotic for me to offer you expertise. What I can offer you is some level of experience, but by no means would I consider myself an expert, because if I'm competing against other experts, I think what you're going to find is somebody who comes in and says, "Hey, I have experience, but I'm not an expert," is much more likely to say, "I don't know," when they don't know. Is much more likely to ask questions when questions would clarify things, whereas the expert might be held up as somebody who should just know the answer. And I'm a firm believer that the idea of we should just know answers is a quick path to mediocrity, and is a quick path to struggling with things that we probably could have avoided. And what I mean by that is, I stop asking clarifying questions when I'm an expert. I potentially stop being vulnerable when I'm an expert. Not necessarily, I could be taking my own definition of expertise here and applying it broadly, but I'd be concerned about being an expert in anything, because life's too challenging for us to really see around all the potential corners. I don't even know what all the corners are. So I would just say I have experience, but not necessarily expertise.
Well, I think that is a really great point, especially in the context of architecture and architects, right? We've got a lot of people in this audience that, um, their whole career is based around exploration and finding solutions, finding solutions to your project, your problem.
Yep.
If you need to build out a new office space for Lessonly, right? As
Yep.
as an example, I know you guys moved. It's probably been a couple of years ago now, but I think what you're talking about and asking the questions, the vulnerability. I think that plays really well in the world of the exploration that a lot of these professionals that are in the audience today, it's there every day, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I despise the rigidity of, of knowing the answer and, and being an expert, because I think that rigidity, I want looseness. I want flow. I want you and I today to flow in a way that, is conversational, and when we're not, where we're more in our, in our flow state instead of, our brain that might kind of paralyze me if I think too hard. When I'm really conversational, I'm in a more emotional state,
Right.
than I am in my kind of rational brain. So I like to engage with people like that, no matter what level of work I'm doing, whether I'm making art or I'm trying to solve somebody's business problem, because I think that's where people open up and communicate what's on their minds. And I think communication and relationship have an equal sign between them. Strong communication tends to equal strong relationship. Weak communication tends to equal weak relationship. And I think business and life, what's more important than relationships with myself and with other people? So I want to communicate well. And the rigidity and perfectionism will decrease that communication in my experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. It's just kind of thinking about what we've got coming up for context and clarity. I try to do these themes for the week. And like I said at the beginning, we've been talking about culture this week. So we've talked about retaining employees. We've talked about communication. And next week, we're going to be focused on emotional intelligence and empathy. And that's one of the things that, as I think ahead to next week and even how to tie the theme for this week to the next week, I think what you're talking about is so critical, because how can we serve the people, right? We're whether you're a servant leader, whether you're a service provider, your professional services like architects and the others, how can you serve these people if you aren't connecting with them?
Right.
If you aren't asking the questions like you're talking about, it's just one of the things that's tickling my brain a lot this week.
Let's talk about it.
I think that's, I think there can be a fallback many times to an order taker. I think it's one of the problems that we see a lot in some of the professional services. Hey, somebody comes to me, they tell me what they want. I'm just going to automatically crank that out. Right. Somebody came to me and said, hey, I need a set of blueprints, which that just made the hair on the back of the neck of every architect just stand up when I said that.
It's so old fashioned of you, Jeff.
I know it's old fashioned.
Wow.
All right. I need a permit set. Does that make you feel better?
That's better. That's better.
But okay, well, this is what they told me. This is what they were willing to pay. Is that really our role? Or is our role to ask those questions, to ask those probing questions, maybe have some of those difficult conversations that you talk about in the book? Where do we go off track when we become that order taker? How do we stay on track in terms of the emotional intelligence, in terms of serving people better? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think if we're an order taker, it's just not going to be that interesting, right? Because I think when somebody comes at us and says, I need something, they have a single perspective. And I think the job of any teammate or any relationship is to add different perspectives, not necessarily challenge the other ones, but just to be a different flashlight on the globe. So if we think about a globe, in the darkness, each one of us has a flashlight on that globe. It's only going to shine so much light on so much of the globe, right? You can't shine a single light on a globe and catch the whole thing. But we get a couple flashlights on there. My perspective's added, your perspective's added. We might get a clear sense of what we're looking at. And if it's a big globe, we might need a lot of flashlights. We might have to take some guesses. But I hope you get the idea of each one of us can reveal something. And ultimately, there's going to be a day when we have to decide, what we're going to do together. But let's find some flashlights on the globe before we jump to that, because we might find that our initial instinct or initial intuition was just a single perspective that could have been enhanced or adapted if we spend a little more time communicating.
Yeah. Go ahead, Katharine.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say that when I was reading your book, it really struck me that it's kind of like this anti-fear book. And I feel like, especially in business situations, people are afraid to speak up or afraid to ask questions or afraid to look like they don't know what they're talking about. So your book gives people permission not to really worry about maybe people, what they think of them.
Mm-hmm.
So to me that I really liked that. And then also in your videos, how you were saying that the book was really all about relationships, any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Katharine,
right.
Thank you. That's a beautiful takeaway. Like the fear stuff, that's beautiful to me that's what stuck out to you. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always asking questions and I embarrass myself sometimes with how many questions I ask. But I mean, life is kind of, if you're all shut down and have it figured out or act like you do, what's it all about?
Yeah, you've pretty much narrowed your opportunities there. Like the perfectionist has to make their world smaller over time if they want to stay a perfectionist.
Right.
I don't want to. So I want to make my consciousness expand over time, not shrink. My biggest fear is becoming a sliver of my soul. Over time, I go from a whole circle to a sliver of it because I've just killed myself over time. That's my biggest fear, and I want to become a bigger over time. So yeah, sorry, continue.
No, and I do think that the whole perfection thing has to do with fear too. I feel like that's why people are perfectionists. They're afraid to put their whatever it is out into the world because it's not ready. But it's never going to be ready. That's the whole thing. And like you said, like with your previous company, if you had just asked other people's opinions earlier, it could have really enhanced your whole your company, what you were doing, but if you just keep everything to yourself, then you don't have that help. Like the flashlights you were just talking about. But anyway, I do have a question from an audience member.
Go ahead.
I need to say myself. Here, I'm going to add it to the screen. Okay. There it goes. So as an architect, we need to be as perfect as possible, meaning we can't make big mistakes in the construction documents. I mean, really, that's the only place you can't make mistakes. I feel like all the rest of it, you can have good and not great ideas and throw them out and get feedback and everything. But some architects feel like they need to be perfect in their construction set. So how do you do good, competent work like that and let go of the perfectionism along the way?
Yeah. So I do not pretend to know how to be an architect. So I'm sure there are places where precision is incredibly important. Perfection, I think, is different than precision. I think something can be precise, and perfect is a subjective standard.
True.
But I think there are times when precision matters, and I do not deny folks of making the extra invested effort in getting something to be precise when it needs to be. When I worry about perfectionism, I worry about limiting our options, about limiting the potential for what that precise final draft could look like. Ultimately, we have to make a call, and we have to dial that call in. I worry about doing it too early. In chapter 2 in the book is Sharing Before You're Ready, which is about bringing more flashlights to the globe, seeing different perspectives, choosing the one that we all agree, excites us and motivates us and energizes us and fills the goal best. Then there's going to be a time when we got to make sure that scales for 30,000 people. That's my equivalent on the software engineering side. Is we build a feature and we have to make sure it scales for millions of people at any given time. But for one customer who's got 30,000 people in there, they're going to hit it all at once, and that's a time to be more precise. But it's not being precise too early can limit our options and can cause us to just wouldn't be precise too early. I think there is a time for precision, and I think those two things to each time their own.
I think that's a great distinction. Precision versus perfection.
Yeah.
That's it's interesting. I'm trying, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, it's almost when you define it that way, it's almost the two diverging paths there. So thank you for saying that. What's this one, Katharine?
Yeah, this is neat. Hey, Mark, thanks for the note on my audio. You mind if I read this one, Katharine?
Go for it.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
And Mark, tell me if the audio is coming in a bit better. I might have been holding.
Sounds good. Yeah, sounds good now.
Great. Mark asks, how can we be vulnerable and open and flexible and honest and find flow and be perceived as a leader with the answers and solutions? Our clients and employees expect us to know the answers. Yes, I love this. I actually wrote about this very recently. I was speaking to a team at Goodwill and was asked a very similar question. This is a question that comes up a lot because I think it's easy to think in kind of binary of I either know the answer or I'm not leading. And what I like to think of this as, in a moment I can say, hey, I am confident we're going to figure this out. I'm just not yet sure how. And what I'm doing when I say I'm confident we're going to figure this out is I'm expressing the certainty people need, which is we're going to do this. But then the uncertainty of I'm not yet sure how. And then what do I do after that? Well, I invite people in to help with the uncertain part. What do you think we should do? And I don't think people want to be on a team where a leader knows and says, here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to go do it. They want to be invited into the solution. So I don't think anybody has trouble with, it's not mutually exclusive is my answer. You can be uncertain and certain at the very same time. And in that sentence of, I'm not sure how we're going to figure it out, but I'm certain we can, I'm expressing uncertainty followed by certainty or vice versa, depending on the cadence that I deliver it. And I don't think it's much more complicated than that. To just make sure we bring them both to the conversation. What people don't want in a leader is they say, I have no idea and we're never going to figure it out. That's not going to be very inspiring. They also don't want somebody coming in, as far in my experience, saying, I know exactly what we're going to do, just take my orders. There's certainty and uncertainty at the very same time. And I find that anything that is I find the beautiful kind of transcendent stuff tends to have, this is not an original idea. This has been exposed to me through, as much as I can learn about spirituality and religion and the reasons we keep creating it. Well, one of the things that, spirituality has taught me is that two things that seem like they're two opposite ends on the polarities, bringing them together at the very same time is when we find something divine. And I think that's what we're doing with vulnerability is we're saying, I don't know, but I bet we'll figure it out. And at the very same time, there's certainty and uncertainty in that same moment. And I think what I'm finding from spirituality is when you can bring those two things together, it's almost a holy or divine moment.
As you're explaining that, it really brings to my mind a term that's thrown around a lot in the architecture circles and other professional services as well. It's the idea of the trusted advisor. Every architect out there wants to be seen as the trusted advisor, sort of the holy grail. And I could do an entire session on how to get there and when you have to start earning that title, basically. But I think what you're saying there really goes to being the trusted advisor, right? If I'm hiring you as my trusted advisor, you're advising me, right? I don't think automatically that you have absolutely every answer.
No.
Because at the same time, I'm hoping, or at least I'm imagining that my problems and my goals are unique. So how could you possibly have all the answers?
Amen. You said it. You said it. This is how, if we were to describe our best friend, we would say that, we appreciate their certainty at times. We also appreciate the times when they say, I don't know. And I found that to be something that Dr. Kristen Neff, who wrote a book called Self-Compassion, has really helped me think about, which is how would I respond to maybe something that I'm judging myself for if my friend were doing it, my best friend were doing it, just changing the context. Changing the context. It's not me anymore. It's my friend. I'm reading a book by Robert Sapolsky right now, who's a behavioral, he studies behavior. And one of the things he talks about is in certain situations, people can give sage advice to somebody else, but then you ask them what they would do and they freeze. And so, let's just separate it from ourselves and say how would I want my trusted advisor to show up to the room? And then let's be that. But if I'm like, well, how should I show up to the room? Then I can get muddled. And I think that 1 degree of separation can be very powerful.
That's revolutionary right there.
I put this up on, it's not a question, but I just thought it was a good point about where does fear start in the design world? And I don't know if this is Rod, I think. What I don't know if this is what he meant, but is this what happens when we get up to present our ideas in architecture school and we're just ripped to shreds? So is that where the fear is instilled in us? I'm just wondering if that's what Rod meant by this. But I mean, it's kind of interesting. That whole process is a totally different subject that I could get into a lot about whether that's a good way to nurture people's creativity and putting themselves out there when they are basically standing in front of a group of people just waiting to be embarrassed, I guess. Kind of way that felt.
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. And the gentleman, another gentleman who comes to mind, and I'm gonna David Burns is his name. He wrote this book called Feeling Good, and he's the one who calls perfectionism the world's greatest con game. He had a gentleman named Hank, and Hank had already fired 20 doctors, and now Hank was coming to David Burns to be the 21st doctor he fires. Hank's got a big anger issue, and David wanted to really fire Hank because he felt like Hank was, maybe encroaching on his space, and he was trying to put up his boundaries, but he also wanted to be the guy who figured Hank out. And he called his teammates, he called other therapists and said, what should I do? And somebody said, this is the golden opportunity for you to practice patience and criticism and acceptance of criticism. So he reframed and reappraised the situation with Hank. It's a golden opportunity to learn how to take criticism from a highly critical, angry person. And that changed everything for him. And the thing that he did with Hank is he said, I want to hear more of what you don't like about me, because Hank was very critical of him. He said, tell me more, Hank. And it totally neutralized Hank. Hank didn't want to tell him what he didn't like about him when he was invited to. So how does that relate to, the criticism in architecture school? Well, let's consider it a time when we develop the capacity to hear feedback that we may or may not agree with, that can cut. And let's say, why do we allow it to cut us? Why do we allow that to cut so deeply? Because it's me allowing somebody's words to hold on. Right.
Yeah.
And so and I'm not saying that's easy to do. I'm saying that is one way to reappraise the situation and say, this is my perfect opportunity to learn how to take criticism and still believe in my own ideas.
Very good point.
Yeah, that's a great point. You said it a minute ago. It's not easy to do, right?
No,
and so some of these things that we're talking about, and a lot of what's in your book, in Do Better Work, the idea of sharing before you're ready, and getting to agreements, having difficult conversations. Some of those are really scary ideas for a lot of us. So, do you have any tips on how to let go? I mean, being vulnerable is a big part of the book as well. Well, it's the first chapter, right?
It is.
So, do you have any tips on how to get over that fear?
Yeah. So I would say you mentioned that these things, they're not easy. And I said the same. I consider them simple and hard. And what I love about simple and hard is I think the things that are most beneficial to our lives are simple and hard. Moving more, eating well, getting the right amount of sleep. They're simple, but they're hard. And I think that's where a lot of the most important things in life, that's the axis they cross, is they're simple and they're hard. And I think we like things, I'll speak for myself. I've historically been enamored by complicated answers to complicated problems, because I thought they were more intelligent. And now I see that there's really nothing intelligent about solving a complicated problem with a complicated answer. How do we bring simplicity? How do we bring something fundamentally simple, though difficult, to a situation? And I think that's what I tried to get to in these chapters. Ask clarifying questions. It's simple. It's hard. It's hard because I'm scared. It's hard because being vulnerable in a situation is always going to be uncomfortable, right? I'm dropping my armor, and I'm exposing something I don't know. And somebody, if they want to, can come in and stab where I've just exposed. Now, the beautiful thing is, I don't want to be at the whims of somebody who is so hurt that they want to hurt me, because I happened to be vulnerable in the moment. So this is my chance, going back to David Burns, to practice not giving a hoot what the most judgmental people around me want to judge me for. Because what I've realized is highly judgmental individuals tend to be highly hurt, sad, lonely individuals, right? I'm not judging them for that, but if I feel incredibly judgmental outwardly to the world, it's probably because I'm incredibly judgmental of my own self. And so what does that tell me? Well, I don't want to be at the whims. I don't want to be led by some of the most hurt people that are out there. And what I find is people who are compassionate with themselves and compassionate toward others are the least judgmental among us. So I don't really have to worry about them judging me, because that's not their prerogative. They're not sitting there looking for an angle to stab into my wound. They're sitting there and going, that's a human who deserves compassion, just like I'm a human who deserves compassion. So my big point here is, if you want to judge me, it's your problem. And I will listen to criticism that as it comes at me, and it will be the stuff that is resonant with something that I probably need to work on will hit me a different way than the stuff that is just somebody trying to hurt me. So I'll filter through it. I know my problems. I think we all know our own problems, and I think when somebody points them out, we know it. But I'm not going to be at the whim of the hurt person who just wants to hurt. Because I want to live my own life, and I ultimately forsake my life if I allow the hurt people to guide me. It's just not how I want to live. So letting go of judgment has been a big thing for me. There's things I can still learn from it. And I have a square squad, which is what Brene Brown recommends. A square squad is this idea of 1 inch by 1 inch piece of paper, write down the names of the people who love you, respect you, and will tell you the truth. So I can come to that square squad and say, hey, somebody said something that, was initially hurtful to me. And I'd like to validate if you think that, I could work on this thing. And the square squad will go, yeah, Max, yeah, totally. You can work on that. Patience may be one of the things. Or they'll go, no, Max, I think that person was just hurt, and I have not seen you to be that way. So finding this group that allows the criticism to kind of filter through them and validate or invalidate it, I think is a very important. So I don't shut myself off from kind of all feedback. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I have a practical question about your square.
Yeah.
So you said an inch by an inch. So that's could be 2 names or maybe 4 names. Or if you were really small, it could be 8 names.
Yeah, you use both sides. Yeah, and you can abbreviate if you want.
Sides. Okay.
You can abbreviate if you want. I think the big idea is just a limit. If you can fit 6
I
names
get that
on
idea,
there,
but I didn't know how many you thought, you would. 4 names?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering.
I have 10 to 12 people in my square squad, and different folks who understand different parts of my life better. But yeah, I think I get your point.
No, I don't have a point. I was asking just a question about how many names I should put on the square.
Fair. I should have said I get the question.
Okay. Just practically speaking, I'm very practical in the actionable items here. So
yeah. We'll give one a try, and I think you might find an inch is a little more room than you might think.
Yeah, I know it is.
And then try both sides.
I'll try both sides.
Be a really cool tip.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this, because we're talking about those hurtful people, and on some level, we're a little bit in the theoretical. Katharine just mentioned being practical. Architects have clients. You at Lessonly, you have customers. How do you deal with maybe negative feedback, or how do you deal with the interpersonal, I guess we could say, of the customers or clients in the same way that we're talking about right now?
Yeah. So I want to be real clear when I talk about, hurt people hurting people, we're all hurt people hurting people. I'm not some healed guy who's never hurt somebody. I mean, I'm talking about all of us, right? I'm just pointing out that if each person is doing their own work to heal, then I bet we'll be more compassionate to one another and we'll be less inclined to judge. But to answer your next question on how do we deal with a customer who is maybe hurt or angry, my best friend and business partner, Connor Burt, does it excellently. And what he does is he shows up to that conversation precisely the same way, whether that person were gleeful or not. He shows up calm. He shows up with an attitude of let's fix this together. He does not show up and engage in a fight. And even if that person baits him into a fight, he will not take the bait. And it's amazing to watch because I am a lot more easily hooked than he is to kind of push back. What he kind of has this intuitive sense of the Tao Te Ching, this idea of not kind of letting the motion of the ocean go, not resisting things that are happening, but instead using whatever is happening and maybe going with that flow, but nudging it in the direction that we want it to go. He does not try to fight back. Because when we fight back, what we do is we create counter resistance to resistance. And then what does the resistance do? It pushes even harder. And so as soon as we're arguing, we're both losing. But if I'm de-escalating, we can both start to win. And Connor just goes straight to de-escalation. And what tends to happen is that person either is not willing to self-regulate their emotions and de-escalate with him, which then it tends to look pretty silly, right? Because if he's not there to fight and they're fighting, it just starts to look pretty silly. Or they de-escalate and they come back and they say, "Hey, thanks for talking about that. I'm sorry if I got a little, I got a little hot under the collar." And then he goes, "No problem," and he really means it, no problem. But he just shows up how he wants them to be showing up in that moment, and I don't think life is much more complicated than that. How do you want people showing up in the moment, and are you showing up that way? If not, then say I'm sorry or recalibrate and get there. Or just show up that way, and I don't think it's much more complicated than that. And I think that's a hugely beautiful and important way to think.
That's an amazing statement. I'm going to show up the way that I want them to show up.
Yep.
That's
amazing. It's so hard. It's hard because we're mimicking creatures, Jeff. We mimic one another. So we have to resist that mimicry of, if somebody trudges to the table and is mad, if I trudge to the table and am mad and my wife responds with anger, or I respond to her with anger as she trudges to the table, I'm mimicking, right? But why am I mimicking? Well, why am I frustrated in that moment? It's because I want something to show up a different way. So I got to show up that way. And it's really hard to do. And I have to apologize for not doing it a lot. But I'm either doing it or I'm apologizing. And when I apologize, the cool thing is I'm modeling there as well. It's all about modeling, right? How do I want you to show up to the table? How do I want you to show up to the room? Well, when I apologize for not showing up that way, I'm doing what I want the other person to do should they make a similar error, right? I want them to show up and say, hey, sorry about that. So I'm modeling either way. I'm either knocking it out of the park or I'm making a mistake and apologizing. And either way, I'm modeling.
Hmm.
So in that moment too, I mean, you're having these amazing human interactions. And as you're describing that, I'm also thinking about all these conversations we've been having this week about culture. And I'm going, and I know this is part of the point as well. What an amazing leader, right? If every one of our bosses, if every one of our firm leaders did exactly what you were just talking about, how wonderful would we think that leader was? And on the flip side, because like I said earlier, some of these in the audience today will be solo practitioners, so they don't have employees, but they're working with consultants. Probably they're certainly working with clients if they're in business. But taking that idea from dinner with your wife to your role as CEO of Lessonly, I think that's amazing as well.
Yeah, and I have to have people around me who show me how to do it. I mean, this is an insight of watching other people who do that and being so profoundly moved by it that I'm like, that's how I want to be. Like they showed me some gold, and I was like, I want to be like that. I would describe the modeling behavior as, if you want to see it, be it. That's the quick tagline. It's just a different riff on the kind of quote that's generally attributed to Gandhi around, be the change you want to see in the world. Right, and it's rewritten because people don't hear be the change you want to see in the world anymore. It goes one and out the other. So we have to, bring new life to old gold. And that's old gold that needs new life because it's still just as relevant, right? So we need to continually re-riff on that same concept, give it new words, give it new articulation so people hear it again. And the alternative to, if you want to see it, be it, is I give what I get. So if I've gotten abuse, I give abuse. If I've gotten a short stick, I give the short stick. And that is just that's an escalation world of, if violence is done against me, I give violence elsewhere. And if you want to see it, be it, is a de-escalation world. Generally, in my experience, a de-escalation world, because I am going to show up with calmness if that's what I want to see in this room. And if I want to see somebody who pushes for something they believe in, then I'm going to push for something I believe in. You get the idea. But I give what I get is dangerous as hell, and it's really, really common. It's more just I think the natural response.
I think that's an excellent point. Another thing that strikes me is that, of course, we all have different personalities. You said it before. We all have different strengths and different weaknesses, and somewhere in between. Oftentimes, I think there are people in this profession that, I think they might have a mindset. I'm somehow not good enough, or back to this idea of perfectionism. I guess I'm worried about. Katharine was explaining it earlier. One of the parts of this culture in architecture that many people experiences. Literally or figuratively or close to literally an almost beatdown in architecture school. They come out, right, with some residual from that. So one of the things that strikes me about what you're saying is it takes a certain strength to
Oh, yeah.
do some of these things that you're talking about. So what about those that may still be suffering from their experiences, may still be carrying those things? Is there any advice for finding that strength to do these things that you're talking about?
Yeah, so I relate that that what I'm hearing from you, because I don't know your world as well as you do, but I relate to a friend who's a lawyer, and he said very similar things about his experience, kind of raising up in the legal world. Of it just became toxic to him, and he felt like so many people around him were kind of didn't want to see him win, didn't want to see him succeed. It was a very competitive, cutthroat thing. So let's go back to if you want to see it, be it. Uh, if we go back to if we want to see it, be it, I can spend all day for the rest of my life complaining about whatever field I'm in and the gaps that it has. Or I can do the thing that I want everybody else to do, which is say I'm not going to participate in those gaps. I refuse to. If I don't like where I work, I'm gonna vote with my feet, and I'm gonna find a different place to work that believes in the same things that I do. The easy thing to do is go, I gotta stay here, right? I gotta stick here around it, or I can change this place from the inside. You know when you can, and you know when you can't. You know when you can change a system and when you can't. I believe you do. So I guess my point is, venting is different than processing. And I think venting, what I've learned about venting, and I didn't make this up, this is people who study emotional processing. They find that people who vent tend to feel better immediately, but then long-term feel worse. People who process, who engage and say, why do I feel frustrated? Why do I feel sad? Where is it coming from? Do that hard work. They don't tend to like doing the processing part, but they tend to feel way better after. So one of them has immediate release, right? The venting. I release the vent, but I don't feel better over time. I actually become more entrenched in my frustrations. When I process, it's harder to do up front. It's harder to take the time to emotionally process, to talk into a voice recorder, to write down my feelings, and to try to sort them out. But I have longer term rewards. In the same way, it's easy to vent about how shitty the world is. And in that moment of venting, we might sit there and feel better and feel like, well, at least, we're better than whatever world is around us. But you are the world. You are the world. And if you see the world as bleak, it might be because you see things in your life as bleak. We see the world. I've heard a quote once that I love is, we see the world as we are, not as it is. So how do we heal ourselves? How do we get ourselves in places that support us? They are out there. It's going to require work. It's going to require vulnerability. It's going to require risk-taking, among all things, risk-taking. And I think one of the challenges of the world is not everybody is built to take risks. Like one of my friends said, we have a particular word for people who will take risks for gain instead of take risks to not lose. And he's like, it's an entrepreneur. People who take risks for gain are very different than people who take risks to not lose. And a lot of us take risks to not, or avoid risks to not lose, right? And entrepreneurs take risks to gain. And I think we all need to remember that a life worth living is one that has risks. Have you ever read Viktor Frankl's book, The Man's Search for Meaning, where he talks about being in the Holocaust camps?
I have not, but I'm
okay. Please do. If you need a shot in the arm, holy moly.
What's the name of that book again?
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he explains something that was explained, by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, but he modernizes it, which is we get to choose what we relate to any given event. We get to choose what we ascribe to a given event. But what he really, the reason I bring him up is he says, meaning in life can come from anywhere. We can ascribe meaning to anything. Humans tend to find it in three places: work done well, love loved, and suffering suffered nobly. So work done well, we find meaning in doing work well. We converge around that idea. We find meaning in work done well, in love loved, and in suffering suffered nobly. Every one of those requires risk taking. I cannot do work well without taking risks, right? Asking the clarifying questions, putting my own creative personality on the line. I won't, anytime I share my work, I'm putting my creative self on the line, right? For somebody to judge it. That's risk. Loving is a big risk, right? When I love somebody, when I love my daughter or my wife, I extend my skin to them. And when they get hurt, a little bit of me gets hurt too. That's a risk, right? If I love too many things, I extend my skin to a lot of stuff. And then suffering suffered nobly. Well, suffering is risk, going through suffering is risky. We'd like to avoid it. My point is, to have a meaningful life, risk has to be a part of your calculation, and I think a lot of folks would rather want the comfort and convenient life, but they don't want to risk. They want the good life, but they don't want to risk. So if you think your profession is bleak, risk something and make your part of that profession not so bleak. Easier said than done. Hard, simple, hard, right? I'm not trying to say that this is easy. I'm just saying that you get one life.
Yeah, the mic drop quote in there though was if you think your profession is bleak, take a risk. I love that. There's so much good motivation that needs to come out of that.
Thanks for listening. You could tell that I think you could probably tell that I could have gone on to that one for about 20 more minutes. So I hope I didn't go on too long. I'm happy to answer Mark's question. Thanks for putting this up, Katharine.
Yeah. I was trying to find it on your website because I was thinking, what do you, how did you get into all this?
Yeah, when you say all this, you mean like kind of human relations or like living?
Well, Mark's question for those who are listening on the podcast is, Max, what is your origin story? How did you find your way to focus on this topic?
Yeah.
So,
my spirit, man, my spirit. Like so I have seen deep suffering in people who are deeply addicted, and what I realized as some people I love who are deeply addicted to substances that cause perverted behavior, right? Anger, and just some really tough stuff to watch. And these are people I love. So when I see them judged, it hurts me. And so in that moment, I say, I don't want anybody judging that person who I love. So I'm going to find a way to learn how to not judge other people, because there's somebody that all those other people are people who are also loved by someone, right? And I know how much it hurts to see the people I love harshly judged for doing things that I get why they're being judged. But if we find a compassionate state, we can see that this is a hurt person who's hurting, right? This is not somebody who chose to be addicted and loves being addicted. But to see, the anger and the sadness cast at them hurt me. So I was like, I don't want to live like that. I want to be the model for what I want other people to do when they see that person that I love who's being judged. I want them to say, oh, I'm sure that's a tough spot that person's coming from. So that was a big encouragement for me. This happened, started in my life when I was in my early 20s, when I realized that somebody I loved was highly addicted, and it wasn't a clear path to changing. And it's, still a challenge. So it was a, big opener for me. And yeah, I hope that helps. I mean, I think that just opened my heart a bit to being like, I don't love what's happening to the person I love, and so what am I going to learn from it? And yeah, I hope that helps. So somebody asked a question that, Katharine, did you see the one about, can one do good work in a bad field? Can one be a good Nazi, for example? Thank you. This is a Facebook user who said, can one do good work in a bad field? Can one be a good Nazi, for example? I don't know how to comment on the good Nazi side. I'm not educated enough on that. I think that's like me walking into a minefield. I'll say good work in a bad field, though, that part. Well, I don't know if the field's bad. I think that the people who exist in the field might have learned some perverted behaviors. So I think you can do good work in there. And I think I hope many of you are. But I don't think the field's tainted. I don't think the water's bad. I think there's a lot of folks who have learned a certain way, is what it sounds like to me, about how they engage with one another. And in any given time in that field, you can engage differently. And those people might not care, but you're still doing your job. You might not change a single soul but yourself, but that is changing the world right there. That makes sense?
One thing that I don't know why, but it triggers in my brain is, this idea that we hear a lot, and those that join Context and Clarity every weekday afternoon hear me say this, or maybe tired of hearing me say this, but this idea of a business model that hasn't changed by and large since the 50s. It's this is the way we've always done it. This is our model. This is the traditional model. We talk about that sometimes. And so I don't know if can one do good work in a bad field really ties specifically to that. But, in everything that you're talking about and making these changes, right, for all the complaints that we might have about whatever, the way our profession is perceived, or the way that our clients treat us, or the way that our boss treats us, or whatever our context is. And then especially in terms of, this is the way we've always done it.
Yep.
And somebody had the philosophical question is calculated risk really risk? Is that really shouldn't we just be taking risk and changing those things? This is the way we've always done it. Oh, I'm still complaining about it. Shouldn't we just take the risk?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, I think risks are information, right? The more risks we take, the more information we get. The more we stick with our current system, we're probably going to get information we already have. So I'd rather do some learning. And I do a book club with my buddies. It's been one of the neatest ways that we've kind of bonded over quarantine. Friends who I've never read a book with my whole life, and I've been friends with them since third grade. And now we read books. One of them recommended Animal Farm, and in an Animal Farm, there are people who treat the animals not very great on a farm. The animals overthrow the people and start their own farm, and they have all these great ideas for how they want to run the farm, but they don't change the goal of the farm. The goal of the farm stays the same. The same human goal is now the animal's goal, and they tend to go towards the same behaviors. So what does that tell us? Well, in systems thinking, we know that the greatest way to change a system is to change the goal of the system. Because if we don't change the goal of the system, like if we don't change anything about the economic goal of America, which is the number one goal as far as I can tell for economic growth, nothing's going to change in America. If the economic growth is the central aiming point for us, then the system will push toward that, and we won't see a lot of change. We have to change the goal if we want to see the system change. We can't just change the people, is the argument, and think the system's going to change, because it doesn't. Like, we've seen that enough times, right? Keep changing the people. You have different presidents. Yeah, this, they're still bombing someplace, somewhere. They're still doing the same stuff. My point is, if you start your own architecture firm, change the goal of architecture from something that's different than the last architecture firm you worked at. What is your new goal? And that can orient you around a whole different set of behaviors but if you keep the goal the same, well, it's to make as much money as an architect as possible. You might just get the exact same stuff like Animal Farm, where all of a sudden the animals become the humans. And I think it's a really great analogy for systems thinking, which is the goal freaking matters a hell of a lot. And if we don't change the goal, the behaviors probably won't change.
Yeah, I think that's another mic drop quote right there. We've got to, if you don't like it, we've got to change the goal. That's excellent. So I'm reading comments about animals now on the side of the screen there.
It's an interesting book.
Yeah. George Orwell, is that right?
You got it. Pretty quick read in my experience. It was like an hour and a half, 2 hour long. So pretty quick read.
What other books have you read in the book club?
We read Man's Search for Meaning was the first one, which was awesome. Gosh, I'm blanking right now. First we did Man's Search for Meaning, and then we did one that I recommended, and I'm blanking on it. If it comes to me, I'll let you know.
Do Better Work.
We didn't read Do Better Work. No, I wouldn't put my friends through that.
Well, I know we're getting close to the top of the hour here, so let me maybe round this out with a couple of questions. First of all, why did you write Do Better Work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. You asking that. The big idea was I was writing notes, and Kyle Lacey, our chief marketing officer, said, "Hey, we should put these notes into a book because people seem to like the messages." And then ultimately, we realized that wasn't a good enough goal. Like, it wasn't a clear enough goal because like a bunch of notes put together don't necessarily make a cohesive message. So then we said, well, let's write a book that teaches people when they walk into Lessonly on the first day what we care about. And if we do that in a way that is not Lessonly specific, how we care about treating humans, well, that could transcend Lessonly, right? That could be bigger than our workplace. But if I write specifically to Lessonly teammates, then I have my focus, right? I know it basically channeled my energy into, I want each new teammate, I want each current teammate to have this. What are the challenges that I keep facing in my job that I'd rather not face anymore? Well, not having difficult conversations was one of the challenges. People get real frustrated. They don't have the difficult conversation, and the frustration just blows up. Not getting agreements, right? Not asking clarifying questions. People coming in and being like, I'm just really mad we're doing it that way. And I'm like, where did you get the idea we're doing it that way? And they're like, well, I just assumed based on what I heard. And I'm like, we got to ask clarifying questions. And I'm not judging these folks. I do the same damn stuff. But I wanted to stop. The company was getting bigger, and I wanted to stop. So ultimately, it was like, what can we give to people from a guidebook standpoint that minimizes that? So that they come in and they say, I'm really frustrated. And I say, well, have you had a difficult conversation yet? Nope. Okay, go do that. Whereas beforehand, I had to listen to the whole explanation about what they're frustrated about. And then ultimately be like, okay, maybe you should have a difficult conversation. Now they come in, they're like, I'm frustrated. Have you had a difficult conversation? No. Go. You know how to do it, and it just made my life a lot easier. But ultimately, I've always wanted to write a book, and I felt like I got to capture my spirit a bit in that book. And it felt like a great gift. I have a daughter that's 6 months old, and when I don't want to pass away before her time. But I know somebody could hand her that book and she get a little piece of her dad. And I'm real pumped about that. And I try to write notes each week or every other week or every 3 weeks to our team that I want to hand off to my daughter saying she can get a piece of her dad no matter where I am. It matters to me to kind of get this stuff logged.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Let me ask one more question. The title is Do Better Work. So how do you define better work? What is better work to you?
Yeah, it is creating clarity and camaraderie in a relationship. So camaraderie is mutual trust and respect between two people, and clarity is understanding what matters, why it matters, how to do it when possible, what's happening, why it's happening, how it impacts me, how it impacts you. And both of these are muscles. We don't get camaraderie or clarity without working at them continually. A lot of us had clarity and then COVID happened and we didn't anymore, So these are not static light switches like where, hey, clarity's on, camaraderie on, go, and they'll just stay on. They're muscles where we build them. And in order to keep them, we have to keep building them.
That's excellent. Yeah, if clarity was a light switch, I guess we wouldn't have context and clarity because we do this every day.
I love the title, man. I do. Thanks for having me today. It was a blast.
Really appreciate it, Max. It's been a great conversation. Really appreciate everything you've shared with us today.
Katharine, Jeff, if you ever want to do it again, we can do it. I've enjoyed the time, and I appreciate all the pre-work y'all did. You're pros. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks you,
for
Max.
Inspiration, Max. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks. And for anybody else that's out there, we're going to let Max go, and we appreciate Max. But if you want to stick around for a couple of minutes for the to wrap this up with us, you're welcome to do that. We'll run this for another few minutes if you're ready and willing. I think that was a fantastic conversation. Anybody that's listening on the podcast version of this, maybe a week from now or a year from now or whatever, one of the things that you missed was the passion in Max's face and in his body language. I mean, this guy, I'm sure it comes across just in his voice, but we have the benefit of seeing him on the screen, and this just exudes out of his pores. It's incredible.
It's true.
Yeah. What are you drinking there?
Tea in my Ruth Bader Ginsburg mug.
Nice.
Yep. It's my afternoon tea. Yeah. I mean, he is an inspiration, and he is so right about just being, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, basically. And where is this person coming from if they're screaming at you for 20 minutes, as I was reading about earlier today? Like, if your client is screaming at you for 20 minutes, it's not really about you. It's hard to take. It's really hard to take, but something's going on with them. So if you can separate yourself and decide you're not taking it totally personally, then that's what I heard from him. You can choose what you're going to take personally, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he made so many great points there. And so again, I would encourage everybody, we're not here to sell books for Max, but read the book or listen to the book or, get it on Kindle or what. Like I said, last time I looked last week as we were prepping for this, and last week it was free on Kindle if you have your whatever the Kindle account is called. The other thing is that if you go to, let me put it up on the screen here. If you go to dobetterwork.com, you can find out more about the book, certainly, but also there's a series of videos where they basically go chapter by chapter. You have to put in your email address to gain access. I have not received a single email since I put my email address in there. So I think it's definitely worth the trade, but basically Max interviews different business leaders on the topic of each one of the chapters of the book. And I just, and again, in preparation for this conversation today, I was watching those videos, and there's so much there. There's so much that we need to bring into this profession out of those books in dealing with ourselves, in dealing with our employees or our consultants, in dealing with our clients. This is
families.
Our families. Yeah. And I don't know if you caught that, but when I asked him what do better work means to him, it wasn't strictly workplace, right? It wasn't strictly the work of architecture or, for him, software design or whatever. He included family, he included relationships in that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And they say that he's wise beyond his age, but I think he might be about 33. Just saying. Some other wise person was 33. So
somebody asked,
put that out there.
I saw something about New Jersey in a.
Yeah, is he from New Jersey? I think that was Jay Carulli who said that.
He's not from New Jersey. He's actually from Goshen, Indiana. He's right around the corner from me here in Indianapolis. He's from Goshen, Indiana, which is where my son is headed in the fall for college. So yeah,
cool.
Near South Bend, Indiana. Might know that more than Little Goshen. Let's see. Any other? Do we have any other questions or comments that we need to entertain here before we wrap this up?
People say they're going to have to watch it again. I am also going to have to watch it again since I can't. I'm sure I missed some of it as I try to read all the screens. But yeah, he's very. He just was very. He meant what he was saying. He just felt it like you were saying. You could see that. So
yeah, he is. He's an inspiring guy, and in the podcast episode that came out this morning, one of the things that I said was I met Max the first time because I'm on the advisory committee for a leadership development program here in Indianapolis for young architects, the emerging professionals. And Max sat on a panel discussion in one of the sessions for the cohort. It's probably 2 years ago now, with COVID sort of being in between there. And just super impressed with Max, and you can see why, I think, and especially for the young folks in the leadership development program, very inspiring for them and very relatable. He comes from the software development side, but I think just about everything he talks about, I think, is so relatable to the profession of architecture or any creative or professional services.
And Mark had said, I think it was Mark who was saying a couple times in there that it's relates to internet bullies as well. I mean, people who are hurting are going to hurt other people.
Yeah.
So for me, that gives me a lot more understanding when something like someone's acting badly like that. Just think about something they're hurting if they're trying to hurt me or somebody else. So.
Yeah, that was one of my big takeaways as well, is, having that perspective. And you mentioned it just a minute ago. I think he attributed it to the Buddha. We're going to take away what we want to take away from it. I can take whatever I want away from the internet bully or the social media bully, I think is the way Mark put it. I can take away the fact that, there's a hurt person that's just trying to release something, or I can take away, hey, there's someone that's attacking me. And I think, you said, I forget how you put it a couple of minutes ago, you were talking about maybe a client that was, it was,
I was reading about it on
that's right,
one of the Facebook groups. Yeah.
I've told this story before, I think, of a client of mine that called me. I was in the car and I was on my way to a meeting, and I had to lay the phone on the dashboard of my car without even putting it on speakerphone, right? And they're venting. Max said that, used that term earlier. They're just venting. And it really wasn't about me. It wasn't about us. It wasn't about what we were doing for them. But somebody had to let them vent, unfortunately, right? Unfortunately, it was me, I guess, that decided that they had to let him vent. But I like what he was saying about his business partner that would just go in and how they would handle that. I don't know that I handled that situation right or wrong or well or not. I literally laid the phone on the dashboard. But I do know that if I had tried to jump in and argue or get defensive or something like that, it would have gone even worse than
Right.
that was going. That was a great lesson.
So NVC, that came up a couple times, and I couldn't remember what it was. I guess that's communication.
Yes.
That would be an interesting topic to talk about sometime also.
We can do that. Anybody that really, really enjoys conversations like this, and I'm always fascinated by the way these themes for the weeks and these topics evolve. A lot of this is just serendipity. To be completely honest, we're trying to arrange topics and speakers and things like that. And 2 weeks ago, we were talking about your value mindset, which I think tied pretty well with this idea of culture this week. And then if you really like conversations like this, if you read the book, Do Better Work, the idea of emotion, I don't know if this term is ever brought up in the book.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't think so. But what they're talking about a lot is emotional intelligence. And next week, our theme, like I said earlier, is going to revolve around emotional intelligence, empathy, those types of topics. So if this is your thing, if these kind of conversations are your thing, make sure you're with us every day next week, because it's emotional intelligence all week. How do we get it? Do we have it? How do we understand ourselves? How do we understand our clients?
What do you do if you don't have it, though? Can you make it?
I think
it's emotional. It's one of the, how many types of intelligence are we supposed to have, Jeff? I don't know. I should read more about it. I just took the quiz. So I took the quiz on the emotional intelligence. Everybody, maybe take the quiz before next week. So, we know where we stand in that.
Yeah. Yeah. As usual, we'll announce next week's speaker, next week's special guest, Thursday guest, on Monday. And we'll put together some homework, something that you can do to prepare for the conversation on Thursday. So we'll grab that quiz and we'll put it in as a link, so you can do that. We'll give you some other assignments as well, but yeah, I think you can actually increase your emotional intelligence.
Can you? I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
I mean, because can you increase other parts of your intelligence?
Sure. Why not?
I don't know. I guess we'll talk about it next week.
Absolutely, we will. To all of you out there, thank you. Thanks for spending a little over an hour with us. Thanks for all your questions and comments, and lots of comments about, I've got to watch this again. I've got to listen to this again. You can find this inside the Entre Architect Community Facebook group. You can find this on LinkedIn. Now, just connect with me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find it. On LinkedIn, you can go to the Entre Architect YouTube channel or the Entre Architect Twitch channel, and you can watch this as many times as you want. I think it was a fantastic conversation. I think there's a lot to dig into, a lot to understand, a lot to unpack here. So, go back, watch it, listen to it, and it will come out Monday at noon in the podcast version as well, if that is your if that's your preferred medium. I'll be back here again tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, 4 p.m. Eastern, only inside the Entre Architect Community Facebook group, as we are 4 days a week. Tomorrow, we're going back to our mini series that we do every Friday, or we have been doing for several weeks now and several weeks to come, talking about different digital and social media channels that architects could use, maybe should use, maybe shouldn't use,
should not use,
or should not. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about TikTok for architects. So join us tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, inside the Entre Architect Community Facebook group. I'll announce that topic as early as I can tomorrow morning, so you can be reminded of that and you can get ready for that. I'll also be inside the Clubhouse app tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern, talking about the topic of the day, TikTok for architects. Looking for questions, looking for comments, best practices, no practices, whatever. But we'll talk about TikTok for architects in Clubhouse tomorrow morning as well. So with that, again, thank you, everybody. Thanks for being a part of this. And for any of you that have not joined us before, thanks for joining us. Maybe you can come back and join us again next Thursday, or if you're part of the Entre Architect Community Facebook group, join us tomorrow. We'll do this again. Take care of yourself. Be well. Stay well. Keep those around you safe and well, please. Still a lot of stuff going on around the world. And take a little bit of time to breathe tonight. Come back again rejuvenated and ready to go back at it tomorrow, because we're going to do it again. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow.
See you later.